Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Today, I have with me not only a dear friend of mine, but a true rags to riches story. I cannot wait for you, our listeners, to hear this story. It's the most amazing one ever. This guy is so near and dear to me. Just his personality, his humbleness. He has not changed 1 second from the trailer house to the big house he's in right now. And without even going any further, I want everybody to be introduced to Dr. Tim Young. Dr. Tim, how are you, buddy?
Brother Mitch, great to see you, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, dude, this was one that was certainly going to be on the podcast list at some point or another. What's it been now? 25, 6, 7, 8 years?
91?
91.
91 when we met, yeah.
This story is for every single kid out there, no matter race, sex, anything. Your story is one of the most motivating stories I've ever heard in my life. I hope by the end of this story, people get it, man. You have not changed from the poorest of poorest to the richest of riches. And brother, I appreciate that. Let's roll. Tell me what it was like for you becoming this great Dr. Tim Young.
Well, it's interesting, Mitch, and I never really thought about my life that much because I lived it, and that's what people do. They just live and then they wake up one day and go, what the hell just happened? And that was kind of literally what happened. But when I start dissecting or breaking it down, and, I've had the opportunity now to coach and work with people for the last, 15 plus years. And so you use your life experiences to help others go through their experiences. And so reflecting back, and then you and I've had these conversations, it kind of started, really in the beginning. So I was born in Iowa City, Iowa. That's my and the only reason I bring that up is because this was in the 60s. I was born in 1967. And my father and my grandfather and my uncles and the men in my family and everybody in the family, they all moved from Southwest Missouri down. It's called a little area called Ava, Missouri, and to give that perspective, Springfield, Missouri, if you can find that on the map, and if you go southeast about 50 miles down in the hills, there's a little hole in the wall country town called Ava. Well, back in the 60s, there was no jobs anywhere. I mean, it was a rough time. And so all the people in my family moved to Iowa City and up to Davenport, Iowa, because in Davenport, Iowa, there was a huge Oscar Mayer plant there, and there was work. They needed help. And so the men in my family were butchers, meat cutters and butchers. My father, my grandfather, my uncles, my cousins. And that's really, quite honestly, what I was kind of being groomed to be, was just another butcher. So when I was 3 years old, they'd had enough of Iowa City, and then back to the hills they moved. And it was fascinating because I don't remember moving back, but I do remember what happened. Talking to my family, and I know what they did. So my father and mother and my uncle and my aunt, they started a slaughterhouse, which basically people would bring beef and cattle and hogs to this place, and then they did the slaughtering. And then they took it to another place and they did the processing, package it for hamburger and steaks and all that. But they did all the slaughtering. Well, that's what when my first memory is working in a slaughterhouse. I'm, little bitty guy, and I'm dragging hides to the hide house and throwing salt and helping get cattle in and cleaning the guts off the floor. And, my mom, she's, bless her heart, she's like a saint. She's, at this time, she had me when she was 17. So she's like, at this time, she's like, I don't know, 25, 26 years old, 25, and she's 5'1". She's up on a ladder gutting hogs with her bare hands. I mean, this is what I was raised in. But, Mitch, what's crazy is he was raised down in the hills. There's just an attitude, right? Poor is proud. And you don't know anything. You don't know what you don't know. And we didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet. Hell, we we had one channel, and I don't even remember if we watched TV, you listen, my memory of any kind of media was listening to the Grand Ole Opry on a transistor radio on a creek bank, But you and I've had this conversation. When I look back, I think about how I was raised, and I talked to my mother about this, and I said, "What the hell?" And in looking back, and she goes, "Oh, I know." She said, "But we just didn't know any different." And an example of that. We didn't go to the grocery store and buy things. We like ketchup and mustard. condiments. Everything else, you either grew it or you killed it. You raised it. I mean, and that's all I knew. Man, when I say we didn't have things, we just didn't have things. But I didn't know any different, right? You don't know what you're missing if you don't ever have it.
Yeah.
I will tell you this: I always had food on the table. I always had a warm place to lay down, and I had two parents that generally loved me, even though my dad was crazy. They did, but so that was kind of the environment, right? So about the second grade, my dad decided he's tired of living, in town, which is Ava's like the whole population's 4,000, and that's with the rural, right? So there's probably 1,000 people living in this town, and he's tired of living in town. So he moves us down in the hills. And for the listeners, if you guys want to have some fun in a little geography, I want you to try to find Thornfield, Missouri. Look that up. And we're so far down in the hills. And I recently was down there with my mother. Sometimes I like to go back where I started, man. It's just, I don't know. When my life right now gets a little chaotic, I go back home, and it brings me, it connects me, man. It centers you. Anyway, we're driving off the hill. We go to that old house, and it's still there, and I don't know how. And Mom said, she goes, I got a story I've never told you. She said, you know what we paid for this place? And I'm like, well, I was expecting them to pay you to live here, And he said they paid $4,000 for a house and 3 acres. $4,000, Mitch.
Yeah.
I paid, I know people pay that for a bottle of wine, So anyway, we were so far down in the hills. It was a long walk to the next house, and there was an old couple that lived there. I mean, I was literally, and my sister, I was 6 and she was 2, about 2 or 3. She's 3 years younger. So, she would go with them, but I would get out of school, Mitch, and the school was kindergarten through 12th in one little building. That's where I went. And I would get out of school, and the bus would drop me off at home, and it'd be like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, Mom and Dad, where they worked, they still worked at the slaughterhouse. That was a good 45 miles, 40 miles, and it wasn't 40 miles of highway. We're 40 miles of backwoods, right? It's not a straight drive. And they wouldn't get home a lot of times till after dark. Now, I want you all to put this in perspective. You got a 5-year-old at the house in the hills with no one to call, no one to help. If anything happens, I'm 5. I'm dealing with this on my own until they got home. Again, put it in perspective. I'm not a teenager. I'm 6 years old. I'm in the first grade, and I had a 22. It wasn't a BB gun. It was a hunting rifle, and I would leave at daylight. And I wouldn't eat all day long. I'd be gone until dark and come home. And, my mom would be losing her shit because I was still out in the woods. And I'm like, I just, out hunting. That's just what I did, and I've got a 6-year-old grandson now. I'm like, I wouldn't let him out of the house to play with his car in the driveway, let alone. But it's, it's an interesting thing when you look back. And when I say, we hunted, we fished. I cut my baby teeth on squirrel meat, man. People don't get it, but hell, squirrel's good. You know how to cook it, right?
And you know what? You know what I think is important for the listeners to know? This is 100% a true story.
So, what's funny is I look back at that time of my life. I played in the creek. I hunted. I fished. There was a kind of a cave up on a hill that I used to go by myself because I had no friends. There was nobody around, man. There was no kids anywhere. And I would just dream things up, but I was alone. But you don't know what you don't know, right? So in the 3rd grade, Dad decides we're moving back to the city again. Here we go. So he gets a job with Hormel Meatpacking. So he goes from the slaughterhouse to Hormel, and now he's making more money. And we get this house in Springfield, Missouri, and in the 3rd grade. And that year was pretty uneventful, other than first time I ever played baseball. I learned to mow yards. I was 3rd grade mowing yards, making some extra money. Pretty uneventful. But here's where everything kind of went 180 in my world, and it's kind of a weird deal. And this is kind of, you and I've had this conversation. This is the turning point in my life that set me, I think, on a different projection. So again, my father, it always goes back to your dad, right? My mom was a saint. My father was the one I had an issue with. He decides he's tired of living in a city again. So he moves us back out into the country. And for geography, get the Google map out, Hurley, Missouri. Now Hurley's in the middle of nowhere, but it's about 25 miles outside of Springfield. Here's the problem with Hurley. I show up in the 4th grade, and these kids have went to school together all the way through. No one ever comes or goes in this place. No one ever moves there. You're either already there or you leave. All of a sudden, not only am I a new kid, for some reason, I'm the city boy. Wait a minute. I was raised in the hills, but because I moved from Springfield, now I'm the city boy and I'm a freaking target. And it was, bullying. People talk about bullying today, and I just kind of laugh a little bit. And you don't know what bullying is. It was when you have a whole damn school. I had one girl that liked me, and she wasn't big enough to defend me. So, I mean, ass whippings. It's just it was. I told my mother this was the worst year of my life as a child. So, turning point. So we had this kid, Mitch. He was. So first through sixth was in one building, and then seventh grade through 12 was in the big building down the hill. Well, in the little building, that was supposed to be grade school. Well, we had a kid that failed the sixth grade twice. So he should have been in the eighth grade. Now, I don't know if all of you can think about this, but from the sixth grade to eighth grade, boys grow a lot. This guy was a grown man in the sixth grade. I don't remember his name, but I called him Jethro, because that's what he reminded me of. And Jethro decided he didn't like me, the littlest kid in the school. They were kindergartners bigger than me. And it was like a movie, Mitch. Every day, damn near every day, unless he wasn't there or he was caught doing something else, I would walk to the door of the classroom and I would look both ways, take a deep breath, and take off running. And I would get to the front steps, and it was a big steps down to the bus, and run. And he was right on my tail. Chase me to the bus every day. Absolutely terrifying. I mean, here's the thing. You know how you remember where we were at 9/11?
Yeah.
Remember, we all do that. We remember where we were when certain things happened, because they said when there's an emotion attached to it, you never forget it. When you're terrified, you never forget it. And I remember this like I was running down the steps yesterday. One day, I don't know why. I think God decided to have pity on me, and he threw down a little bit of something, and I get right to the bus, and Jethro was on me, man. I can feel him on me, and right as I get ready to step into the bus, something struck me, and I stopped. I planted my right foot, and I turned, and I swung. Again, I ain't a very big kid. I mean, I'm like smaller than the average is big to me. And catch this kid. And what was crazy was I think I really pictured in my brain, he saw me turn and face him, and it kind of confused him, and he was trying to stop. And there was gravel on pavement, and he was already kind of slipping. But when I caught him, man, I caught him flush, and he went straight to his back, and his head bounced off. I was freaking petrified. In that bus, I went down in my seat, like, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, right? Of course, I'm terrified to go back to school the next day, but, what do you do? So I get back to school. The first thing, I get called in to the big school, the principal's office. And he's sitting there, and I'm sitting here, and I'm getting my ass chewed for hitting this kid. And I'm only in the fourth grade. I'm just a dumb hillbilly, right? I don't know much. And I haven't talked about it, but I'm thinking in my brain, well, our saying that we have, this is some,
This is some bullshit.
But at that time, I thought, you know what? Okay, I'll take my lickings on this one. So a couple of days later, I'm in the boys' bathroom, and I get down and I wash my hands, and I turn around, and this kid walks through the door. And when he sees me, the look of terror, and he almost breaks his neck to get out of the room, to get away from me. Right then. Oh, hell yeah. I learned the most valuable lesson ever, and that was a turning point in my life. And Mitch, I will sit here in front of you, this audience, and God, I will tell you, I never ran from another fight, ever. And not only fights, and I don't mean just physically fights, I mean any kind of fight, anything that I'm going to talk about through this podcast, never ran again. I planted my damn foot and I swung. I did a whole lecture series on plant your feet, because it's, and you and I've had this talk, and I don't know if people are going to like this or not. And people, violence is not the answer. You know what? Sometimes, yes, it is. Yes, it was. And that was the answer at that moment. That was the answer. And there's been times in my life that it was still the answer. But Mitch, what I learned, and I didn't even know I was learning it, right? It was a tool that was put into me that I've used through my life that I didn't even know I had. But moving forward, I used it so many times, you know, but that was the turning point. That was the catalyst. And I think maybe many people in their lives, there's a turning point. There comes a point where everybody goes, I've had enough. I'm done.
Yep.
And I think that, that was really what happened. So from the 5th grade on, up through graduation, it's back to Springfield. And I had a great, living there in the next house, we was $16,000. I almost bought that house last year. I went by there and it was for sale and it was still $16,000. And I almost bought it. My wife goes, what? I go, what do you want with it? I don't know. I just want it. I mean, it's cool. But anyway, but it was, I went through a lot of stuff from 5th grade through my senior year, but it was a normal stuff, man. I was a normal kid, played football, played baseball. I wrestled, just chased girls, rode my bikes, got in fights in the alleys, just normal stuff. But a couple of things that stick out. 6th grade. Now I was wiry, man. I was, if they had ADD drugs back then, I would have been drugged out of my mind. I couldn't sit still for anything. I just sitting down was not in my repertoire, So,
not much has changed.
No, not really. Not too much. I had a 6th grade teacher put me in the hallway, Miss Henderson. I'll never forget her. I can see her face as I close my eyes. She's right there, straight out of a movie, straight out of Wizard of Oz. She's a freaking wicked witch. She got right in my face. I'll never forget what she said. The most inspirational words ever. You are a worthless little bastard. You will never amount to anything. That was the last words that crazy lady ever said to me. Well, I don't know quite how to take that, So, but it shapes you, right? Again, another tool that I'm putting away that I didn't even know I was going to use as time goes on. This is my dad in a nutshell. This is how I was raised. This is how I still do everything in my world, Mitch. I was at football practice, and my dad and his buddies, they spent all day long cutting wood, but they cut it in huge chunks, and they loaded the back of the truck up. They cut 11 loads of wood. Now, this was a 2-day thing, and he never said anything to me the first day. So 2 days, and what they did was they backed it up to our backyard, and they just threw it out in the backyard. So 11 loads of wood. I come home from football practice. I pull into the driveway, and all I see is a brand new splitting maul with a bow wrapped around it, because he's a smart ass, right? No note, nothing, just a split maul with a bow. All I did is I take a deep breath and I go in there and I change clothes and I grabbed the maul and went to work because I knew what that meant. There's a job to be done, and it's your job. So what's interesting is I look back at those lessons my father, gave me, but then it wasn't just that. Work ethic is something that I think that is missing, Mitch. When I was 16 years old, I spent the summer with my uncle down in the hills, down in the country. And this is, and I hope people will listen to this. This is what we did. And this man did it for years, but we'd get up at 4:00 in the morning and he milked cows, and he had 100 head cattle, a little over 100 milk cows. Well, they're out in the field. You got to go out and get them all in, get them in a corral, and then one at a time. Well, actually had 4, but this milk, we milked 4 cattle. So we milked all morning long. We ate a little bit of breakfast, straight to the hayfield. And of course, I don't think about it at the time because you don't question, you just do, right? Well, again, remember me telling you I was a 98-pound freshman? I weighed about $105 at this time. Hay bales weigh 60, 70 pounds at the, the green alfalfa. So I'm almost lifting my body weight all damn day. Now, we do that until dark. Then you go to the milk barn. You get all the cows in. You milk again till about midnight, 1 o'clock. You get up at 4. You do it again. 7 days a week, all summer. Not just when you feel like it. There is no days off. There's no missing. There's no getting sick and calling in. It has to be done. It has to be done. No matter how you feel, you got to do it. I made a decision, Mitch, that I was going to pay attention in school a little bit more because this sucks. This farming business is for the freaking birds, right?
So far we got plant your foot. That was a difference, right?
Yeah, plant your foot. Swing first, man.
Swing first.
Yeah.
Yep. Swing first. And then all of a sudden, like, well, wait a minute, this sucks. Perhaps I should use my brain or do something a little different.
Something a little different, because this whole farming and cutting hay and milking and butchering, no, no. And there's something there's got to be more. And here's the thing too. What you got to understand is, I was never exposed to more. I didn't know that this whole world that I've got to live now didn't exist. The only world I knew was my little bubble. And that, hell, a great living was $6 an hour. No one went to college in my family. Nobody went to college, not in my immediate family. And I guess I was going to go. Hell, I don't know. I was just trying to survive the day. Keep from getting your ass whipped, and chase girls. But we had an assignment one year, and my English teacher, Miss Collins, she had an assignment, and it was listen to this song, and I don't remember the song, and then as you listen to it, write a poem. This poem that we was in, it was creative arts, right?
I'd give $1 million to have that poem right now.
But no, here's the thing about it. No, here's what's interesting. I've never written a poem in my life. I wrote this. It won the Language Arts Fair and was published in a book at Southwest Missouri State. I kid you not. I don't know why. It just was. Well, what Miss Collins did, when she read it, she pulled me to the side. She said, "I'm done with you." She said, "I'm not going to allow you to screw things up." She said, "You actually can think for yourself. You have more than you're given." But what she did was she found a way to motivate me, to get me using my brain instead of planting my foot and swinging, because that's all I did in high school. But and here's what's great is I actually had the opportunity several years ago to find Miss Collins, and I called her, and she said she remembered me. I'm sure she might have, because I was a pain in the ass. But it was interesting. I thanked her. I said, "This is where my life is, and really, I believe you're a huge part of that." And she cried on the phone. It was pretty cool to have an opportunity to call someone and say, "Hey, thank you for not giving up on me and actually putting me a little bit on the right path." So it was kind of crazy. But what happened was after graduation, a couple significant things. So for the first time in my life, I was told you can't do something, and it was kind of fascinating. So I decided, I graduated 155 pounds, sick of being small, sick of I was a running back in high school, but hell, our biggest guy was 202 pounds. That was our lineman. We had this little, and I had enough. I was like, and we had a kid in our school, Randy. His name was Randy, and he was a bodybuilder. And in our school, he was a monster. And me and Randy become friends. And I was like, "Randy, I want to be a bodybuilder." Mitch, I could tell you where I was standing in the school when he said these words to me: "You'll be like everybody else. You can't do it. You'll quit." And that was, other than our 30th year high school reunion, that was the last words I ever spoke to him. Yeah, I won Teenage Mr. Missouri. I mean, after that, but it was what happened was I was hell bent. Immediately, I went to the closest gym. The big bodybuilders in there. Mr. Springfield was in there. Mr. Missouri was in there, and I crawled in their back pocket and I followed them around, and I asked them questions. And anytime they turn around, "Hey, can I work in with you? Hey, can you?" I mean, they were like, "Dude, who is this kid?" Right? And that was who I was. I was like, I'll be damned if you tell me I can't do something. That was in June, July of 1985, and in early December of 1985, I was riding with a guy in a Chevy Chevette. To put it in perspective, if some of you guys listening to this might be old enough to remember what the Chevy Chevettes were, they were really like a cracker box with wheels, and I was a passenger. He came off this hill about 70 miles an hour right after a rain, and the last words this idiot said was, "I taught people how to drive down this highway." At that very moment, he loses control, and we start skidding, and it's 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour. We go off a bridge, off of it turned at the corner, went up a hill, and the bridge went down to the creek. Bam, landed on my side. Broke my back, my ribs. I mean, it was, I should have never walked away. I wished I at one time, I had a picture of the car, and I just got rid of it because I didn't want to see it again. But I wish I had it to put in perspective how bad this was. No one should have walked away from it. Anybody that saw the car goes, no one survived that. But I did. Well, here's what happened. Again, God does things to you right at the right time. He gave me the courage to plant my foot at that time. The courage comes in weird places, but they did the MRIs and CAT scans of my back, and the orthopedic doctors back then said, "Well, look, your weightlifting days are done. You're never going to lift weights like you did again, and you're probably going to limp for the rest of your life because this is bad." Well, I'm 19 years old at the time. Actually, I'm 18. I hadn't even turned 19 yet. You're devastated, right? You're like, my whole world just came to an end because at that point in my life, Mitch, there was no career. There was no aspirations. There was no money. There was none of that. I was going to be a bodybuilder. I was told I can't. I was going to be a bodybuilder, and now I can't. So what I do, broken back, told these things. I go see my Uncle Bill, and I tell him this story, and he just kind of smiled. Again, we're talking Springfield. Even Springfield's a city. It's north side of Springfield. It's really it's the successful hillbillies, that actually have shoes. They brush their teeth and all that shit. It's kind of, the fancy people, right? And he had his pot belly, and I'll never forget. He had his hands on his belly, and I tell him the story, and he had a couple of choice words, and he started adjusting me. 6 weeks later, I was back in the gym working out. 6 months later, I won Teenage Mr. Missouri. And again, at that point, I didn't, nothing about success, nothing about being a doctor or a chiropractor. And he would throw things out there. He goes, you know what? You want to go to chiropractic school? I don't have a son. I need to leave this to somebody. It was just interesting. He kept planting those seeds, right? Planting those seeds. Inside me, for the first time in my entire life, and I look back on this a lot. I was working in a diesel shop, just running parts, and I was bodybuilding, and I was making, $3.25 an hour. I would make $120 a week. And by the time I paid my bills, I had $20 a week for gas and food. That's what I lived on, $20 a week, 1986. That's just the world I lived in. But it was the first time inside, innately, we talk about innate chiropractic, but you can call it whatever you want to. Something was stirring. There's a calling, a pull. I felt a pull. And so I decided to join the Navy. I had a buddy of mine that I grew up with. He joined the Navy. I'm getting out. I joined the Navy. I went in because I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I decided in the Navy I was going to be a SEAL. And so you got to go to your first school. It's basic electronics, electricity. And I get done with my school, and then I go to a Great Lake, Chicago, right? And that was my next school. And I had to go to an A school before I could qualify for BUDS. So I'm in A school, and I'm training, and I'm doing all these things. And my back starts hurting. And see what I left out when I joined the Navy. My recruiting officer, he said, "Now look, because I told him about he said, any injuries, any reason? Well, I was in a bad car wreck." And he goes, "Okay, omit. We're just not going to talk about that. We're just going to leave that off there." And so we don't say anything. Well, my back really started I was having a real hard time. The whole limping thing came out. So they do, I'm 22 years old, Mitch. I don't know any different. They do CAT scans, they do MRIs, they do all these things. And they came back. And after a while, they sent me to the medical building out in Chicago, the medical military building. And this is the way the Navy does. I don't know the rest of them, but they put me at parade rest. And 2 hours later, I'm still standing there. And a lady calls my name, and I finally go up, and she said, "Well, I'm reviewing." And I remember this like it was absolutely yesterday. This is 1988, Great Lake, Chicago. She said, "Well, I'm reviewing your chart." And she said, "Here's a recommendation. What they want to do is they know you have a problem. They don't know what it is, but they want to do exploratory back surgery. And we're going to figure this out." No, ma'am, they're not. Because I'm not very bright, but exploratory back surgery for some reason inside didn't sound like the best opportunity for me, right? I'm like, no. And she goes, "Well, the only thing we can do, I guess, is send you home." Mitch, again, at this point, you got to understand something. I didn't go to church. I wasn't spiritual. I wasn't religious. My grandparents were Church of Christ. My other grandparents were Baptist. My father was an idiot. No, I love him, but we were hillbilly. We didn't go to church. It was, but I will tell you now, looking back, I know exactly what it was, because when I remember the overall sensation and the feeling, God laid His hand on my shoulder at that second, and it said, "You're going to be a chiropractor." And it was a comfort. It was an overwhelming feeling of, okay. I just felt secure. I knew without a shadow of a doubt. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what was coming. I just knew this is what I'm gonna do. And I looked at it and I said, "Send me home." Finally get home, back to Springfield, Missouri. Now along the way, I'll kind of I get married to my first wife, and she was like a close friend, and I was in the Navy. Mitch, you ever heard that saying, when you give a starving man a cracker, it's the best cracker he ever had? Eddie Murphy talked about that, and then when you, yeah. Okay, well, I'll just leave it at that. So so I moved back home. We get married. So I start school that January, undergrad. I go back to SMS, and I never stopped until I get my degree. And there was, I mean, there was a lot of. That's when we met, and when we started chiropractic school, and you knew me. So here's the thing: when you first met me, you met the straight out of the hills in the Navy to chiropractic school professional Tim Young.
Absolute beast. And I always used to think to myself, who comes to class in a spaghetti string tank top? And then I'm like, but I'm not going to go tell him that that's not right.
Well, you know what I learned along the way also, a lot of times you can bluff your way out of some stuff, right? I remember getting out of the car a couple of times, getting ready to get in a fight, and I just took my shirt off. And they got back in the car. I'm like, oh, that works? That's kind of cool. I'll do that every time because that's a whole lot less hard on me. I was raw, man. When I started school, Mitch, not only got my degree, but I learned a lot about different people and how to actually relate and listen and talk. But what's interesting is, Mitch, my wife, we was talking about this. She said, you know what though, you've always had this ability. She said, even when we were first dating, I got out of chiropractic, so I'll get that. When we were first dating, she said, all of my girlfriends, if they had an issue, they had a problem, they had a worry, they went to you. You were the guy that everybody went to if they had a problem. And I don't know, I guess, and here's the thing. I give my father a hard time. I look at, and I painted a picture of a pretty rough upbringing, and it was. But I will tell you a thing, and when I spoke at my father's funeral, this is what I talked about was the man was hard, and the way he was raised and the way I was raised. But I'd never met anyone, him or my mother, more respectful to other people and would go out of their way to do things for other people. I watched him do so many different things. We fished one day all day long, and then we cleaned all these fish, and we went home, and then he got on this little local news station, radio station in Ava, right? And they said, let him know that I've got some fish. And this lady calls in and said, boy, it's been a long time since I had any fresh fish. Not only did we take it to her, we prepared it for her. We put it in the freezer for her. And I mean, we spent all day helping this little lady. We didn't even know. I watched my mother selflessly serve her whole life. And so my upbringing was poor as proud. Don't ask for anything. But if anyone needs anything, you lay down in the ground for them. You give them what you have. If you have nothing, and my friends always knew growing up, if I had $2, you had $1, I had $1. That's just the way I was raised. So I have to really say, when we're talking about the whole rags to riches story, I didn't have much, but what I did have, it was yours. So I get out of chiropractic school, and we all leave, right? We all go our separate ways. This is what you do. We become a big family for 3 years, man. We lived together, worked together, studied together, laughed and cried. We went through a lot, man. I went through a withdrawal, quite honestly. When I left, I missed our chiropractic family because then I went back home to Springfield, and I changed so much. And my friends and the people that I knew then, I couldn't relate the same way, right? You're growing. But I still don't know. I still don't know what the hell I'm doing. And so here's what's crazy. When you graduate chiropractic school, then they have this, this is a sick game that the world plays on you, right? They want you now. You get a degree, but that's not good enough, Mitch. You got to pass what they call national boards. So I passed part 1, I passed part 2, but part 3, you remember we did it again. I failed it 3 times, all 3 times by one question. Along the way, getting ready for that, I was working as a doorman like a bouncer and a doorman and the DJ at this bar was the American light heavyweight kickboxing champion, Robert Hicks. And we became friends, and I started training with him. And so I started training kickboxing and fighting and all this stuff. Well, long story short, we decide that I'm going to fight in a Missouri Tough Man. It's $1,000 first prize. Oh, hell yeah. I'll beat someone to death for $1,000 because I don't, that's you again, might as well have been $1 million, So at this very time, I meet the greatest factor of my success, without even knowing it, was Shannon Edwards, my wife now. We mate. So again, I'm getting ready to tell you how God really loves me. I have proof. So I win the Tough Man, $1,000. I had to pay back bills, back gym payments, and I left me with about $500. It was $300 for the test, right? To come to Oklahoma. Again, Shannon and I were just dating. We drive from Springfield, Missouri to Oklahoma City. She had this old LeBaron that kept overheating, and we had to stop like 2 times and let it cool down so we actually make it. I had just enough money for a hotel room, which was probably $50 that night, something to eat, and then pay for that test. We stayed up all night long. We're kids, man. We stayed up all night partying. I didn't study for that test. I'm like, whatever. But I had studied so much for these board tests. So I take the test. I'm getting to the hardest part, x-ray. And what they had was they had 10 different x-rays, and you got to go station to station, and it was multiple choice. What you saw on this x-ray. I'm like, I'm so blurry-eyed. I haven't slept. I'm like, I don't see nothing. And I looked down there, and it was like A, B, C, and D. And D was unremarkable. I don't see nothing. Unremarkable. I don't see nothing on that. Unremarkable. There's no way in hell I got a 91% on my x-ray because everybody else is trying to find something. I'm hungover. I'm like, I don't see anything, whatever. And I pass that test. I'm in Oklahoma. That's how I know God loves me. He goes, oh, God, this idiot, just pass. Just come on, let's just go somewhere. And so we decide, Shannon and I, we get married. I've got a brand new daughter, Ashley, who's 6 at the time, and Alicia, who's 2. And we pick up and we leave Springfield, Missouri. We leave our family, our friends, and move to Oklahoma City. I had a couple that we went to school with that had started practice down here, and they had 2 different offices, and the guy had opened in Oklahoma City. Well, he was in a car accident and couldn't practice, and so he knew I had an Oklahoma license, and I was just kind of coming back and forth doing some vacation work for extra money before I figured out what I was going to do. And so he invited me to come down and run the office. Well, I came down and fell in love with Oklahoma City, and I moved my new family down. And again, dude, still no concept of money. We had none. We were so broke. I don't even know how. I look back and because of her and how my wife is. The fact that we actually had enough money to move and get a house to rent. I don't even know how we did it, right? I don't know. But anyway, things are going pretty good. I go to the office one day, Mitch, and I go to unlock the door. I get there by myself, and it was just me in this office. And the key won't fit in the lock. It won't work. And like, what's happened? So I go, and this was in a big office building, and I go around to the front where the building manager was, and she was waiting. She goes, I knew you were coming. She goes, you know, Tim, they changed the locks. They shut that office down and moved. Excuse me? These are 2 people that I consider close friends that we graduated with them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went, what? And I get on the phone. I call. They won't answer. So picture this. And my wife is pregnant at the time. Our baby's on the way. So I have 2 daughters, instant family, a wife, a baby on the way, no job, no money, in a brand new town, and I know no one. And when I say no money, Mitch, I don't have money in my pocket to go put $5 of gas in the car to get home. We don't have a checking account. We don't have a savings account. We have a credit card, and it had $1,000 max, and we'd use 500 of it for our honeymoon. That's all we got. That's all we got. And so when I look back, and I've told the story before, so I've reflected on it. Again, I had to plant my foot and swing. Oh, what are your options? Get beat down and stay down? You know, you don't have I don't have an option. So it's fascinating, Mitch. A lot of the listeners this is something that you guys have never heard of. Back then, there was this great big book, a big thick book. It was called a phone book. And you go to the back and it had yellow pages. They were yellow and it had businesses. So I went to chiropractic, and I started at the A's, and I started making phone calls, one right after another. I'm Tim Young. I got a license. I need a place to practice. Click, click, click. There's a lot of chiropractors in Oklahoma, to be honest with you. So I get to the C's. I get to Carpenter Chiropractic, Gary Carpenter, and again, that's a whole other podcast, man. This guy, the most negative, pessimistic guy in the world, but he had opened up a satellite office, and it wasn't doing very well. And he said, well, I guess I can you know what? I can throw you in there and see what you do. Sweet. I got a job. So I go from $500 a week to $700 every 2 weeks. So I start working, and and then you go through that, and I was there for a year, and then I get another job offer and to move to another clinic, and it was a personal injury clinic, and I'm just a treating doctor, and they were paying me $50,000 a year. Wow, dude, I am making it $50,000 a year. We buy our first house, and I use my military. You get a military loan to get your first home, right? And so our first home was $104,000. And when I called my dad and said, "Man, we bought a house," and he goes, "How much is it?" I told him he like to lost his mind. You paid how much? You don't. No one pays $100,000 for a house, young man. You've lost your mind. I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? $100,000 for this house, dude. I sound like the right thing to do. I mean, we bought this house on short sale. We had to repaint it, put new carpet. I mean, it was beat up. People left it tore it up. So our first house. Along the way, a friend of mine, Scott Farley, we went to school with him. He graduated right before we did.
I know.
Out of the blue, again, God said, "Oh, you poor fool! I need to step in again." And Scott Farley, out of the blue, and I hadn't talked to Scott since chiropractic school. This was 1998. I hadn't seen him since '93. So 5 years, right? So it's been 5 years since I've seen the guy. Out of the blue, he calls me and he says, "I'm calling you. I want you to come to a meeting with me in Chicago. It's a chiropractic business meeting, and I want you to come with me." And he said, "Look, all you got to do is get the flight, and I'll pay for everything else." And it was interesting, I didn't even question. I didn't ask what kind of meeting. I remember it's weird. I just go, okay. So I go home and I tell Shannon, and she's looking at me like, you need to do what? It's a $600 to fly to Chicago. So I go to this meeting, Mitch, in Chicago. I sit in this meeting, and all of the things I talk about and so many things I left out of my life all led up to sitting there. And finally, for the first time, somebody stood on stage. Obviously, they're important and they're respected, or they wouldn't be on stage, right? I had never been to a meeting where someone stood on stage. Right? I've been to a couple of concerts, but about it. And this person, and then the next person are saying things that I had never heard. That you can see X amount of patients in your office. You can make this much money. You can actually do these certain things with your life. No one had ever said that to me, ever. I come back home to my wife. She's sitting there, and I said, "Sit down." I said, "We're going." She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "We're going. I've got the answer." And Mitch, from that moment, it took us about 90 days to find our own space, do the build out, and open Young Chiropractic, 1999. And her and I, we just opened, and together. And what was fascinating was her and I talk about this a lot. When we met, a few mutual friends, we were at a party one night, and I took her home, drove her home, and we were sitting in a car, and we sat there and we talked almost till daylight, just talking. And I told her, I made this comment. I said, "I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's happening in my life, but I know I'm going somewhere. I don't know what it looks like. I can't explain it. I don't know what it means, but I do know something's happening with me." And she said, "Me too." She goes, "Let's do this." And she's like, "Let's do this." So 90 days, we opened this practice. And Mitch, we worked and we studied and we went to every seminar and we went to every class and we went to every office, and we come back and we implemented, we worked and we worked and we planted our foot and we freaking swung every day, and we raised a family. And we started out from, well, I've talked about it, from not knowing anything to our first year in private practice. I collected $240,000. The second year I collected 420. The third year was over 600. Fourth year was over 800. The fifth year I collected over $1 million. And in chiropractic, that's not easily done. And I have yet to be under $1 million. I'm a million plus every since 25 years of practice now. We raise our kids and we get to this point, and now, $1 million practice. It just, and I'm coaching my son's football team, and my oldest daughter is a competitive gymnast, and my middle daughter, she's just doing so many great things. And man, our life is so good, Mitch. It's amazing. But again, we're it, I don't understand what's happening. And I will say this again, we'll have another talk about this someday. But you want to know, if anybody really wants to know the secret to success, in my success, there's a lot of things, right? A lot of things contributed to creating who I am. And along the way, my biggest drive is to help others find their creative why, how to do that. But I will say, Mitch, that girl that I met, that storm that came together, if it hadn't have been for her, I wouldn't be sitting here in this house. I'd probably be still working in a bar somewhere, practicing part time. Because I will tell you, Tony Robbins says this, Mitch. Tony says that there's three people in the world: there's artists, and there's managers, and there's entrepreneurs. And if, for those three, I would consider myself the artist. God gave me a talent. I can take these two hands and I can adjust a bone. I can move it. I understand why, and I know how. And people pay me for it. They drive 2, 3. Hell, people come from other states and other countries for me to adjust it. So I've created that. But my manager, my right hand, my everything, took that and did something with it. And that's really where we're here today. And then now here we are, right? Now here we are. I've got a seminar group. I've got a coaching group. I got 3 practices, getting ready to open a 4th. But more than that, and you know me, Mitch. I get up every day, and I get up in the morning and I walk into my kitchen, and we got this fancy ass coffee machine that you push a button and it grinds fresh coffee and it makes fresh coffee, and I push it, and I look at the house I'm sitting in, and I look out over my land and over the pond and the lake and all the stuff, and I shake my head, wondering how in the hell did you do this? But to quite honest, I am 53 years old, and I could not. I don't know how I could be any happier. Happier with my relationship with my wife. Happy with the relationship with my kids, my grandkids, with the people that work for me and with me, my friends. Um, Everything about my life is ridiculous. And I hope through this long ass story that people get a sense of, no one gave me anything. No one handed me anything. I didn't have a handout.
I tell you, Tim, one of the reasons that I do this podcast and we wrote the books and all that stuff is I was similar to you, man. There was something burning inside us for more, right? There's just something more. Every podcast we do hits a different person. There's some people that listen to be like, I don't know if I like that one, but then they love the other one.
Yeah.
I've been able to rub elbows and shoulders with what is perceived as the best minds in the world and most successful people in the world. And it's not just because you're my bud, but your story, I would listen to it 1,000 times over most of these guys that the world perceives as the greats. And the reason being is because I've got to experience you when you were dead broke.
Yeah.
I've got to experience you when you're rich, and there is not 1 degree of separation of the human being. It's the same guy. And we do have fun. We laugh at you at your expense. I do it all the time. But again, I have the ability to call some really big name people and pull their ear and bullshit with them. And your number's the one I call first. And I don't know if that means a lot to you, but it means a lot to me to have a guy like you.
It means everything, Mitch. And you're the same. What's interesting is, and I know this sounds like a bromance here on this podcast, but it comes a point in your life that people don't. It's hard for people, because the people that know you now, the people that meet me now, they just somehow they think that I always had this. This is what I always was, and I think that's why I really love going back home. I go back on back 40. I go back down, and a few years ago, my son, we were down at my mom's, and we went squirrel hunting, and he killed a squirrel. And I know it might be gross to some of you, but we're cleaning this squirrel, and we got this squirrel, we're gutting it, and I'm out in the creek right there in the spring branch. We're down. He goes, Dad, what do you think people would think if they saw what you're doing right now? And I kind of laughed. I go, well, I'm not quite sure, but they'd have to get over it because, whether I'm speaking or speaking in front of 1,000 people or skinning a squirrel or busting wood or like we talked about cutting wood or mowing a yard or I'm at, a Michelin 3-star restaurant in London, man, you know what? I'm going to have fun. I'm going to be me. I've learned a lot. I've experienced a lot. I care so much. I love people. Um, I want everyone successful. That's why you and I are doing this. I've helped chiropractors for, gosh, all these years, but the same principles apply, man. There's just things in life that you've got to learn to what, I don't care what business you're in, I don't care what profession you're in, but it really boils down to what you just said, man. Don't ever lose who you are or where you come from. Keep centered, keep grounded.
Yep. Oh my God, brother. I tell you what, he's going to have a field day with this, and especially when we show this 195-pound wrestler that turned into Mr. Oklahoma. There's a significant difference.
Well, 98-pound wrestler.
98-pound wrestler. I never know when we do a podcast if we brought the message across like I see it and I feel it and I want it. But I will tell you, I just hope that people not only listen to this, but they share it, and they share it with friends that are trying to do something great or trying to do something bigger, because Tim Young is a giant, especially in the motivational world. Not a bigger heart out there, and I do believe that's why your success is what it is today. Well, and 95% Shannon and 5% your success and your heart.
Exactly, yeah.
But and that is a true statement. We're not joking. She is incredibly instrumental in your guys' success.
Oh, she's everything. She's everything, and
well, I was trying to give you a little credit.
Well, I stand on stage and I bring the message, and she's the epitome of the saying. Behind every successful man is a woman rolling her eyes. But what's funny about her, and I'll give her more credit. She doesn't want credit. She doesn't want her name mentioned. She doesn't want to. She won't speak in front of anybody. She'll talk. I mean, she's great, but she doesn't want credit for anything. She just like, you go, you do, and then let me do what I do, and she does it great. And then you develop that sense of family and loyalty, because I'm so loyal to everyone else, and I've learned a lot, man. I've learned so much, and it's ridiculous. To me, it's like you can have the biggest boat on the lake, but if you're sitting on it by yourself, you're a lonely ass boat owner, right? and so that's why you started Truth Talks. I know that. I know you, man, and that's why I created this, and that's why I'm taking what I've created, the programs that I've created for chiropractors. It's universal. It's human thing. I want everyone. The rising tide raises all boats, man, and I want everyone to understand the fighter in them. There's a genius in you. There's a survivor. There is a success in you. We just got to find a way for you to see it, and that's what this is about, man. And I really appreciate it.
No, that's great. That's a great way to end there, brother. I tell you what, I love you so much, and nobody deserves the success that you've got more than you do.
And I'm not sure about that, but I'm going to appreciate it. I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to keep moving on, just like you, brother. Man, I love you, Mitch. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for all for listening to me. I hope it was something worth listening to.
It certainly was, brother. Well, take care. We'll be speaking soon.
Absolutely. Bye.
All right. Bye, bud.